leadership of the Nigerian employers continue to be sustained. The robust and impeccable contributions of the NLC and TUC's leadership to the ongoing discussion of the tripartite committee on the national minimum wage is worthy of note. This is an indication of the fact that organized labor has gone beyond the bread and butter issues and has indeed become an active social transformational agent whose main desire is to influence policy in this dispensation. We, however, want to sound a note of caution. Without preempting the outcome of the ongoing discussions, we urge that survival of enterprise should be paramount in the minds of organized labor. It is only when businesses survive that people can be employed, and only when people are employed that they can earn wages. As responsible social partners, employers are always open to collaborate on issues that will promote social dialogue, industrial harmony, enterprise competitiveness, and national growth and development. We hope that today's event will further strengthen the understanding and solidarity that existed between organized labor and the organized private sector. Finally, we once again congratulate the dynamic and focused leadership of the NLC and TUC and the generality of hard-working Nigerian workers. We wish you an eventful main day. Long live the NLC, long live the TUC, long live NECA. God bless Nigeria.
Thank you, our employers, for reconfirming that you are committed to the minimum wage process that is on. And we know you will implement it once an agreement is reached. Comrade, the time has come for us to take the message for one of the great leaders of the trade union movement of our contemporary times. I have the singular honor to invite to address this May Day occasion the President of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, Comrade Boboe Bala Kaigama, Comrade President of the TUC, to address the May Day celebration.
New national minimum wage has been mentioned several times in the course of this event, and it is indeed foremost in the hearts of the Nigerian worker.
Within the Nigerian nation, Channels Television is carrying us live, the NTA is carrying us live, the AIT is recording, and it will be played later in the day. We thank you for coming. Solidarity! Forever. Solidarity! Forever. Great Nigerian workers! Great Nigerian workers! Great! His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, ably represented by His Excellency, Comrade Dr. Professor Yemi Osibanjo-San, GCON, distinguished Senator Shehu Sani, representing the Senate President, our own comrade, the Minister of Labor, Comrade Senator Chris Ngige, his Minister of State, other ministers here present, His Excellency, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Comrade Boss Mustapha, our own comrade, the former Governor of Edo State, Comrade Adams Oshomole, my friend, my colleague, and my brother, the President of NLC, Comrade Ayuba Waba, MNI, members of the diplomatic corps here present, particularly our friend, the
the ambassador of Cuba to Nigeria, our international development partners, particularly the ILO Director, Country Director, Comrade Zuma, the Country Director of Frederick Ebert Foundation, the senior special assistants to the President here present, Federal Permanent Secretaries, heads of federal agencies here present, the Director General of NECA, ably represented by his deputy, the NAC members of NLC and TUC here present, presidents and secretary generals of affiliates of Trade Union Congress and NLC here present, our veterans here present, other invited guests, great Nigerian workers, our gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We are here again for our day. Fellow workers, I say congratulations. I know we are determined to have a good country, and a good country we shall have. The theme of this year's May Day celebration is labor movement in national development, dare to struggle, dare to win. The choice of this theme is informed by the role the organized labor movement has played in shaping and reshaping our narrative as a country. So first to mention some of the roles workers have played alongside politicians in reshaping, in resisting our colonial masters for their repugnant policies such as poor wages, general strike over cost of living, the struggle for independence, among others. The Trade Union Congress of Nigeria has always been the shield of the oppressed workers in the country, and we shall not rest on our oars until we have a responsive government that is willing to alleviate our pains. Challenges of national development. The challenges before the country are many, but not insurmountable. The economy. Our economy is still prostrate. There's depth of infrastructure, insecurity rife, weak naira, less investment on human capital development, economy largely undiversified, monumental frauds, and mismanagement. How long can we go on? Politics and corruption. Politics and corruption are like Siamese twins in our country. Politics is the highest paid job today, and you do not really need all the degrees in the world to earn your millions. It has become a do-or-die affair, and a lot of corruption embedded. Your Excellencies, comrades, and friends, according to the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, states have shared over 1.9 trillion Paris Club reform, which probably excludes the proceeds from NNG initially released to offset accumulated salaries of workers. In spite of this, Fiscal Responsibility Commission declared that some state debts have exceeded their revenue by over 480%. Another big challenge. Truly, we can see some noticeable signs on the fight against corruption, but it needs to be more inclusive and far-reaching to avoid suspicion of one-sidedness. The recent invasion of the hollow chambers of the Senate and cutting away of the mayor shows the peak of insensitivity on the part of most people in the chamber. The Senate from history is constituted by men and women of character, people who have excelled in their respective choosing careers, and with good oratory and wisdom. Expectedly, when honorable men and women interrogate issues, ideas and thoughts may differ, but should it be to the extent of inviting hoodlums to desecrate the hallowed chamber, we condemn it and its entirety, and insist that the culprits must be brought to book to forestall such in the future. We also do not believe that suspending any National Assembly member is the way out of dealing with divergent views among members. Manufacturing sector.
The nation's manufacturing sector is seriously troubled due to the increasing joblessness, therein with the attendant high rates of crime in the last few years. Between 2015 to 2018, more than 3,200 senior staff had been sacked in the food and beverages sector. The recent alcoholic tariff proposed by the Minister of Finance will further worsen our plight, as not less than 1,000 workers will lose their jobs. The federal government must wade into this issue now and forestall further threats to our national security. The textile industry, prior to the signing of the World Trade Organization Charter, had employed over 3,000 workforce and millions of indirect jobs. Today, smuggling has stifled the sector and power problem has compounded it. It is the same story with the food and leather industry, pharmaceutical and chemicals, aviation and iron and steel sectors. The Federal Road Safety Commission blames most accidents on fake tires from China and fairly used ones. As a country, it is heart-rending that we do not have specification, but worse than the institutions that are supposed to check goods products into our country are not doing enough. Besides, it is unfortunate that Nigerians who escaped the murderous act of Boko Haram, herdsmen, militants, robbers are killed on our roads simply because someone has failed to do the right thing. In a report of the National Bureau for Statistics, declared that no fewer than 1,306 Nigerians died in road accidents in the fourth quarter of 2017. Of this number, 106 are children, while 1,200 are adults. When will our oil and steel industry rise again? Remember the Alaja, Katsina, and Ajaokuta steel companies. Iron and steel remains the bedrock of industrialization in our country. Government must wake up to its responsibility. The pulp and paper industry at Jeba, Iwopin, Okoibuku have all long been abandoned and forgotten despite several appeals to the government to revive them with a view to adding economic value to the country. It is appalling that Nigeria, with all in large mass, still imports ordinary paper. If we can get the automobile sector right, it will contribute meaningfully to the economy in terms of job creation, tax, etc., etc. We urge the federal government to fully implement the National Automotive Policy Initiative, financial sector. We commend government's determined effort to curb corrupt practices through the operation of the single treasury account, but warehousing the funds and all recovered illegally acquired funds only in CBN continues to have adverse impact on liquidity in the banking sector. By now, government should begin to channel the funds to commercial banks to stimulate economic growth and employment. The judiciary should also expedite actions on corrupt cases to bring to their early end. Your Excellencies and comrades, casual employment is now the order of the day for positions that are permanent in nature and indeed core to the business activities of our banks and other financial institutions. This development is a risky one because of the sensitive nature of the sector. A casual worker cannot be loyal to the organization he or she works. The Central Bank and the Ministry of Labor should immediately check the menace. While we commend government's effort for constantly seeking big foreign investors to stimulate the economy, we also urge them to support the small and medium enterprises by facilitating access to adequate funding, power, and policy consistency because they have huge potentials to create millions of jobs like it is done in other climes. Diversion of bailout funds by states. The use to which bailout funds have been put is a growing concern to us. As we speak, many states still owe their workers between 5 and 10 months' salaries and pension arrears. We demand immediate proof for state governments that are known to have diverted funds while culprits should be made to face the full wrath of the law. What the erring states have done is to form a terrorism against the Nigerian workers. Meanwhile, we have identified states that owe salaries and pension, and serious mobilization is ongoing to vote out such governors in the next elections in their respective states. New national minimum wage. We are delighted to note that the Tripartite Committee on National Minimum Wage has started its assignment in earnest. It is our hope that given the high expectation of Nigerian workers, the committee will complete its work by August 2018 as planned, so that by the last quarter of this year, the hard-pressed Nigerian workers will have a new lease of life. As institution members of the committee, our mandate is very clear. It is what we are pursuing. Health sector. Our healthcare sector has become a ghost of itself. The continuous neglect of healthcare system has opened a floodgate of brain drain, medical tourism. Nigeria is signatory to the 2001 Abuja Declaration of African Health Ministers that pledged to allocate at least 15% of their national budget towards improving their health systems, yet has never been done. The declaration is over a decade now, and Nigeria is not among the few that have achieved that target. To grow the economy, the health system is critical. The people need to be well to be able to work. As a matter of urgency, the government should take drastic action to equip the healthcare sector. Our pain is a needless one. The diseases that claim the lives of Nigeria are preventable. Above all, even when those facilities are provided, welfare of the workers should be made paramount. We urge government to implement agreement reached with respective healthcare workers. Oil and gas sector. We commend the 8th Assembly for passing the first part of the petroleum industry bill known as the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. But we insist on 2 separate regulators for the upstream and the downstream sectors of the industry for the benefit of Nigerians. We call for stakeholders forum for the purposes of holistically examining the challenges confronting the nation's oil and gas industry and provide solutions to the problems. We must make our refineries produce to their installed capacity. In particular, we reiterate that government should ensure that the oil and gas operates in line with international best practice in the interest of the nation, more particularly on the technical and commercial regulations. Thus, the need for 2 independent regulators as obtained prior to the proposed Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, 1 for the upstream and 1 for the downstream sectors, be maintained. Downstream sector. The Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, PPPRA, which has been saddled with the responsibility as commercial regulator since 2003 and has a relevant experience, critical stakeholders on the governing board, structure and personnel to superintend the downstream sector, should be strengthened to form the nucleus of the new regulator body. The upstream. The Department of Petroleum Resources should be strengthened to oversee the upstream sector. The ratio of non-executive to executive directors should be increased to provide specific criteria to guarantee the independence of non-executive directors, and the composition on the board should be reviewed to include all relevant stakeholders. Furthermore, we need to add that we are against 5% foreign levy hidden in the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. The question is, why is it coming now that Nigerians are going through excruciating pains from the mismanagement of the economy? What is the necessity of the marginal levy when Nigeria has not fully broken the shackles of fuel scarcity? If the National Assembly cannot lessen our burden, they should not make it worse. That levy has to be removed immediately. The excuse that the money will be used to fund Petroleum Equalization Fund is not tenable. Education. Education drives the future. China, Malaysia, USA, the UK know this and have taken the advantage of it. We have to take a cue. The federal government must ensure now that the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, recommends 26% of the nation's budget is henceforth allocated to the educational sector. The less than 8% of total budget presently being budgeted cannot bring us out of the woods. the construction industry. The country is currently facing the huge infrastructure gap and partly attached to why a large quantity of agricultural produce get rotten in the farm. All things being equal, the construction industry is supposed to be one of the highest employers of labor, but that has not been the case. There is no need for government to save the industry from total collapse by meeting their obligation to the industry. We also call on the federal government to revisit the local content bill of the construction industry, which got to the second reading in the 7th Assembly. This has become very necessary because much desired industrial revolution and technology transfer will be a mirage without a sustained policy to develop local skills, resources, and materials. Unemployment / insecurity. The country's unemployment rate rose to 18.8% in the third quarter of 2017, from 13.9% recorded in the third quarter of 2016, making it the highest jobless rate since 2009. This confirms that many businesses have shut down between the last quarter of 2017 and the first quarter of 2018 due to the government policies and other factors. 2018 National Budget. 4 months in 2018, the national budget has not been passed. This is counterproductive to the economy and makes us a laughingstock in the eyes of the world. Power. To address our socio-economic challenges, the federal government must see the issue of electricity as a priority. The future still looks bleak and gloomy. The investors have failed in most of their undertakings so far and are even twisting the government to cover up their failures. We urge government to hold these investors to account and stop treating them with kids' gloves. They must comply with the agreement they signed in their contract with the BPE. Excuses must stop. The contracts should be reviewed immediately. We need real investors to take over the power sector. This so-called privatization has failed. Conclusion. Your Excellencies, comrades and friends, let me end this address by asking government at all levels to rise up to the task of building a united, just and egalitarian society. The task is huge, but we can overcome it if we can deal resolutely with the challenges listed above. The future is bright, but the process to attain that bright future is a collective responsibility of all Nigerians. Prosperity will not forgive us if we bequeath a failed state to our children. Happy May Day celebration. If God willing it, we shall see again in 2019. Long live the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Long live the Nigerian Labour Congress. Long live the civil societies of Nigeria. Long live Nigerian workers. Long live Nigeria. Aluta Victoria. Thank you very much.
That was a speech by President of Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, Comrade Boboy Bala Kaigama. And he's talked about a lot of things ranging from economy, politics, corruption. He condemned the recent invasion of the hallowed chamber of the Senate and also commended government's determined effort to curb corrupt practices through the operation of the single treasury account.
Have applied actually to push home. Indeed, the industrial relations is established to regulate the behavior, the right and the privileges of the employers and also the employees. And therefore, at this very juncture, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for another solidarity message, may I invite this very true Nigerian and astute politician with global objectives, who will share himself humbly by himself. Please put your hands together while I invite the Honorable Minister of Labour, His Excellency Senator Dr. Chris Ngige, the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment, for his solidarity message. We want to acknowledge the presence of Comrades Kiri Mohammed, Deputy President, Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Sofiano Mohammed, National Financial Secretary, Nigerian Labour Congress, Dr. Yemisi Bombui, National Auditor, Nigerian Labour Congress, and Comrade Solomon Adelego, Vice President, Nigerian Labour Congress. Also in the house already is Comrade Adams Oshimole.
Solidarity! Mr. President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, represented by Mr. Vice President, Comrade, Pastor, Professor Yemi Osibajo, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Comrade Barrister Boss Mustafa, distinguished Chairman of the Senate Committee and House of Reps Committee on Labor, Employment and Productivity, Honorable Minister of State for Labor and Employment, and other members of the Federal Executive Council who are here. President Emeritus of the Nigerian Labour Congress, former governor of Edo State of Nigeria, and the incoming president of the strongest party in Africa, the All Progressive Congress, Comrade Adam Oshimole. The president of Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Uwaba, and the president of the Trade Union Congress, Comrade Boboy Kaigama. Permanent secretaries, especially Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labor, and the Permanent Secretary, Federal Capital Territory Administration, representing the Minister of the FCT. Special Assistant to the President of National Assembly, and other top government officials who are here. Representative of the DG of NECA, that's Nigeria Employers Consultative Assembly, and other comrades representing the various affiliates of the NSC and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen of the press, and my fellow workers in the vineyard of the big country called Nigeria. It is with pleasure that I attend this year's May Day celebration by the Nigerian workers and the nation at large in honor of the fruits of labor. It is a thing of joy when workers come together in solidarity to celebrate their contributions as an important component of the production process, which is considered very critical in the sustainability of growth and development of any nation. It is always a pleasure to interact and share time with workers on their birthday, which is the May Day. The May Day is a day for workers. It is also a day for sober reflections. And in reflecting, we remember those people who has assembled on that rainy
May 4 in 1886 at the Haymarket Square in Chicago, Illinois, to protest against the inordinate working hours, the harsh working hours, and had advocated for an 8-hour workday. It was a labor rally that turned deadly when bombs that were triggered killed over 8 people, including some policemen. And for this, those workers, those organizers were clamped into jail. Some of them lost their lives. A court found some of them guilty, and they were hung. We mark today, and as we mark today, we salute their courage. The theme chosen by the Federations of Trade Unions today for this May Day celebration is within the global socio-economic environment of our present-day Nigeria, because it depicts that in life is full of struggles, and you cannot win any dividend of life without struggling. Labor movement in national development will be better appreciated if we, within the historical perspectives, it is therefore pertinent to note that trade union movements have a long history with our nation, and this dates back to the early 19th century, when a group of workers organized a strike in the Public Works Department, the then PWD office in Lagos. This strike is now historically known as the Lagos Strike of 1897, and have been described as the first major labor protest of the colonial period in African history. We know that at the time of this strike, Lagos was a colony under the governorship of Henry McCollum, who had then decided to launch a major reform in the administration and the economy of Lagos. He misstepped by trying to reform by cutting the wages paid to indigenous workers in order to increase the supply of labor, and also to try to alter the working hours of the workers in the PWD. This strike broke out in August 9, 1897, and was followed sequentially by a mutiny in the police force of the colony on August 10 of same year. This colonial governor had to do a detour and made notable concessions during the negotiations, which included the abandoning of the planned pay cut and the tampering of the long hours of work by introducing break periods. This strike was generally considered as successful. It is also interesting to note that this fight for fair work time, was in tandem with the global labor struggle at that period for reduced work time, which also gave rise to the May Day. These struggles gave birth in 1999 to the International Labour Organization, ILO, which later became a United Nations body, and the work time fixed then formed the crux of the first convention of the ILO, Convention 001, on hours of work, and which limited the hours of work to 8 hours in a day. It is pertinent to note that labor movement in Nigeria
began in 1912 under the Southern Civil Service Union, which was then headed by Henry Lebert, an immigrant from Ivory Coast, who thought it wise to gather people of like work so that they can freely associate. It had about 500 people as membership, spread from south to north of Nigeria. After the amalgamation of the North and Southern Protectorate of Nigeria in 1914, it had an intermediary name and was called the Colonial Service Union, CCSU, but subsequently was renamed Nigerian Civil Service Union. Lots of battles were waged and won by this trade union against the colonial powers, and this encouraged the emergence of two more trade unions, namely the Nigerian Union of Teachers, NUT, and the Nigerian Union of Railway Workers. These two unions covered the ambits of the socio-economic development at the time, which is education and trades. The colonialists' goal was to use cheap labor at the time to supply raw materials for the imperialist economy. And they made railway transportation the main pivot upon which the whole colonial economy was going to rest. The workers in this sector were then exploited, and consequently, they became rebellious when they discovered the massive cheating that was going on. The rebellion was led by Pa Michael Imodu, who led them to a general strike in June 1945, thereby strengthening the dialectical relationship between the working class and the colonial masters. These were the events that support the maxim of the theme of today's May Day, which is dare to struggle, dare to win. No wonder then that Nigerian independence gradually became conceptualized with the advent of Richardson Constitution in 1946 and the Macpherson Constitution in 1952. This was due to the primary contribution of the trade union movement in Nigeria to national development. At least they showed that Nigerians cannot be taken for a ride for a long time. They acquired a voice and dared to struggle for their rise in the workplace. And this inadvertently became part of the initiatives for national emancipation from the colonial powers. This is trade unionism in glory. In contemporary times, labor movement is considered a social partner in the advancement and realization of production factors. As a partner in the cause of development, much is expected of labor. The leadership of the labor movement is expected at all times to impart frankness to members of the movement. The leadership is expected to constructively engage the government and other employers through social dialogue, which is considered a veritable instrument of negotiation and communication in any sound national industrial relations system. I specifically call on you to join the government of Muhammadu Buhari in his fight against corruption and other ancillary matters. This will be a battle worthwhile, as the output will stand the test of time and majorly contribute to national development. Corruption, as we know it, has become a cankerworm that has Hello? Corruption, as we know, has become a cankerworm that has eaten into the fabric of our national conscience and an obstacle to our sustained development and growth. However,
It is a surmountable obstacle that requires patriotic approach and remedy from each of us. Labour should also, in this time, help to bake the national cake. This time around, oil is no longer the black gold of the world. Hence, all hands must be on deck to make agriculture the new bedrock of the economy, especially with the added advantages of the jobs that is created in the field as blue-collar jobs, as well as the jobs to be generated by the agro-allied industries. In recognition of the importance of the labor movement in Nigeria, great recognition and importance is accorded to freedom of association and right of workers to bargain collectively in our country's constitution and other enabling laws. This, in turn, contributes to national development based on the fact that collectively bargained terms and conditions of work tend to raise the bar on the standard of living of workers, which enhances the nation's progressive step towards eschewing decent work deficit and actualizing a higher social protection floor that will reduce poverty. The same reasoning is applied to all the core labor conventions as propagated and entrenched by the International Labour Organization Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. As you all know, Nigeria has ratified and domesticated all 8 conventions of the ILO. Before concluding this speech, permit me to state the following achievements of the present administration, and these are: number 1, non-retention of workers in the public services of the Federation, encouragement of job retention in the private sector, payment of outstanding promotion arrears, repatriation, first 28 days arrears, which, incidentally, were not accumulated under this government. But the government had made consensuous efforts to liquidate all these arrears of allowances. We have also tried to liquidate allowances for the university academic and non-academic staff, called N allowances. Government has also gone into mass housing programs. We have a federal integrated staff housing program for public servants called FISH, National Housing Program, NHP, and the federal government mass housing. Currently, the national minimum wage, which falls under the purview of the federal exclusive legislative list, is being handled through a tripartite committee. Again, government has engaged in promotion of staff members, deserving staff members, especially those in the directorate cadre and all deserving staff members. We have also intensified recruitment into the military and paramilitary services, immigration, Navy, Customs, Army, Air Force, road safety, and other places. Whereas we have had locations in Nigeria where there had been embargo placed on recruitment. Government has tried also to liquidate pension entitlements with an invigorated Pension Transition Arrangement Directorate, PTAD, and the PENCOM service. In acclamation of these achievements and in anticipation of future progress, I use this occasion of the May Day to encourage workers to always imbibe the culture of communication and uphold the principle of the use of strike as a last resort. Let us endeavor to conserve our mandates productively. I promise you that our doors will always be open to engage your leadership towards a consensual end in all relevant matters of interest to workers' welfare. I wish all Nigerian workers a happy May Day celebration. Long live the Nigeria Labour Congress. Long live the Trade Union Congress. Long live the Nigerian worker. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Iseleto.
That was a speech by Senator Chris Ngige, Honorable Minister, Labour and Employment.
That has been a very wonderful historical appreciation of today's occasion. Another round of applause for the Honorable Minister.
That was a speech by Senator Chris Ngige, Honorable Minister, Labour and Employment. And this is the 2018 May Day celebration coming to you live only on the Nigerian Television Authority. The theme is Role of Labour Movement in National Development. Dare to struggle, dare to win. This event is taking place at the Eagle Square, FCT, Abuja.
We invite him to humbly deliver the solidarity message of the Honorable Minister of FCT, Honorable Malam Muhammad Musa Bello.
In the face of current worldwide economic realities, President Muhammadu Buhari saw the need for an upward review of the national minimum wage, which brought about the tripartite Committee on National Minimum Wage. Senator Chris Ngige also talked about the history of the Workers' Day, which started in 1886. In memory of the struggle for workers for better working conditions, May 1st was declared as a public holiday in 1889 by the International Workers' Congress in Paris.
And other honorable ministers here present, President Nigerian Labour Congress, the President Trade Union Congress, the former NLC President, His Excellency Adams Oshumole, other top government functionaries here present, permanent secretaries, former NLC President and General Secretaries here present, diplomatic corps, members of the press, the Nigerian workers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am highly delighted to convey the sincere felicitation of the Honorable Minister of FCT, Malam Musa Bello, and resident of Federal Capital Territory to Nigerian workers on the occasion of the 2018 Workers' Day celebration. The theme for this year's May Day, which centers on the role of labor in national development, dare to struggle, dare to win, is indeed very apt. Its focus on the national development reflects the efforts of the present administration to build and restore the declining fortunes of the nation. In this project, the Nigerian Labour indeed has a pivotal role to play. Right from the cradle of the Nigerian nation, no group has made sacrifices and paid a greater price than the Nigerian workers. From among the labor, we find the finest class of citizens whose patriotic efforts drive our industries and social services. You are the men and women who labor daily to run our hospitals, schools, and public utilities. You build and maintain our roads, protect lives and properties, and account for the prospecting, processing, and management of our national resources. You deserve to be adequately rewarded for the sweat of your brows and the strength of your fists. The ongoing effort to review the salaries and wages of Nigerian workers bear eloquent testimony of the recognition of your contribution to the national development by the present government. Mr. President led the way by inaugurating a 30-main
member tripartite committee to review and recommend a minimum wage for Nigerian workers. As I bring our felicitations, I would like to appeal to Labour to partner with government toward the successful implementation of economic recovery and growth plan by the present government. Their support will be useful in meeting the objectives of the plan, which include to diversify the economy, grow skills, create wealth, expand infrastructures, create jobs, and ensure food security. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a very successful celebration. Aluta continua. Thank you very much.
That was a speech delivered on behalf of the Honorable Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Malam Mohammed Musa Bello.
Ably represented by the Permanent Secretary of the FCT, Mr. Chinyaka Oha. At this juncture, we want to underscore the good working relationship between the legislative arm of the federal government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Nigerian working people. We have, representing the Senate President, distinguished Senator Bukola Saraki, is here ably represented by the Deputy Chair of the Senate Committee on Labor, distinguished Senator Victor Ume of the All Progressive Grand Alliance, Senator representing the good people of Anambra State in the Senate, and the Chair of the All Progressive Alliance Board of Trustees, Senator of the Federal Republic, Chief Victor Ume, to give us the message of the Senate President. Distinguished Senator Victor Ume, please.
In case you're just joining us, you're watching the 2018 May Day celebration taking place at the Eagle Square, Abuja, and it's coming to you live only on the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Greatest Nigerian workers, Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, ably represented by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, CON, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, members of the National Assembly here present, honorable ministers here present, particularly the Minister for Employment, Labor and Productivity, permanent secretaries here present, the President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Awaba, MNI, the President of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, Comrade Boboy Kaigama, members of the diplomatic community, past leaders of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, members of the Press Corps, ladies and gentlemen, it is my delight to present the remarks by the President of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, Commander Order of the Niger, at the 2018 May Day event organized by the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress at Eagle Square here in Abuja
on May 1, 2018. It is an honor and privilege to be here to identify the Nigerian workers on this glorious occasion. A special welcome to our guests from the public and private sectors, civil society and organized labor spectrum, as well as multinationals, to the 2018 May Day event organized by the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Today's gathering is a long-standing tradition around the globe in recognition of workers, a day set apart to reinforce workers' rights, their demands and expectations from employers, both private and government. This is a day earmarked for workers to replenish themselves and solidarize. Rich in history and purpose, today's event offers us as leaders an opportunity to interact with the citizens we have sworn to govern, to listen to their voices, and to better understand their needs. In Nigeria, the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, being the constitutionally enabled bodies vested with articulating and representing the interests of Nigerian workers in this democratic government, have been doing so diligently and purposefully. It is on this note and in recognition of the human and developmental challenges that beset us as a people that I commend the choice of theme for this year's May Day commemoration, Labor Movement in National Development, Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, as pertinent to the realities of present-day Nigeria. Ours is a country that prides herself on the strength of her people, her unity in diversity, and her resilience in austerity. We have gone through some trying times in the course of our 58-year existence, and we are still standing tall, owing to our doggedness and determination not only to survive, but to thrive against all odds. The workers form the bedrock upon which the building blocks of any sustained national development can be laid. There can be no economic growth without the contribution of workers, and there can be no national development without economic development. Our workers play crucial roles in all we attain as a nation, and this is a fact that calls for recognition always. On this May Day, I salute all Nigerian workers for their sacrifice and resilience in the face of dwindling economic fortunes. What they put in daily to ensure that the ship of state continues to run is tremendous when considered holistically. And I want to urge them not to relent in their efforts to help grow our economy in particular and the nation in general. Central to the theme of these events in recent years has been the issue of remuneration of workers, workers' welfare and productivity. Judging from recent agitations and previous presentations, it is quite evident that the twin issues of workers' welfare and productivity also form the mainstay of the agenda of the labor movement at the present time. The average Nigerian worker is saddled with numerous responsibilities and problems. These include, but are not limited to, the following: lack of adequate remuneration that can effect change on the realities and responsibilities of the times we live in, rising cost of living in the country as a whole, insecurity in some parts of the country, lack of jobs and meaningful opportunities, leading to some of our people seeking other pastures illegally, especially the youth. Effects of inflation and the recent recession on the economy, poor working conditions, living standards way below United Nations and Sustainable Development Goals poverty line, lack of opportunities for job growth and improvement, career progression, security and self-actualization, etc. I've always maintained that our collective strength as a nation is not in our financial clout or the amount of natural endowments or resources we may possess. Our collective strength lies in our human capital, our people, the workforce, and our ability to harness them. Human capital lays the foundation for the optimal utilization of our natural resources. In essence, we will not be a country without the workers. The recent economic recession in the country and other notable factors have played significant roles in the agitation for upward review of the National Minimum Wage Act of 2010. Parents are struggling and in many cases cannot pay for their wards to go to school, thereby frustrating efforts to add value to the education sector. Families cannot afford basic health care because the monthly emoluments of breadwinners prove inadequate for health requirements. Our efforts to restructure housing are also affected by the inability of many to afford basic housing or get access to mortgage. These issues trickle down to a myriad of other sectors like security, transportation, and of course, food and feeding. From the outset of the 8th Senate, and indeed the National Assembly, we have constantly held meetings with civil society organizations, youth representatives, private sector, and NGOs across the development value chain in order to stimulate economic growth and to focus on the needs and aspirations of our people. We are a pro-development National Assembly and will continue to favor policies that better the lives of Nigerians. Just on the 23rd of April 2018, we held a public hearing that was attended by a broad spectrum of the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress and other stakeholders. We assure you that your inputs and views gathered at that public hearing will be subjected to further legislative action towards improving the welfare of Nigerian workers. Having said this, it must be noted that the process of reviewing the National Minimum Wage Act is a painstaking one. Sufficient consultations have to be made in the states, given the peculiarity of their problems. This is an issue that has been on the front burner and one that the federal government must take seriously. This process has to be analyzed relative to country-specific realities in respect of the economy, social and human development. The quest for national development can only be achieved when we come together in recognition and acceptance that some things could be better. We must therefore be willing to come to the round table in dialogue to collectively fashion a new way forward. It is no credit to us as a country that our workers are ranked amongst the most poorly paid in the world, even below some of the countries in the sub-Saharan African region with us. I therefore urge all the tiers of government, in the spirit of this May Day celebration, to have a set of targets for the holistic review of these issues towards a legislative solution that moves us forward. Let me use this opportunity to assure the Nigerian Labour Congress, the Trade Union Congress, and all Nigerians of government's determination to ensure the prompt payment of workers' salaries. The National Assembly is working tirelessly to ensure the rebound of the economy and improve standards of living for all. We as lawmakers will always support all efforts geared towards improving workers' remunerations and general conditions of service and living. Of this, you can be assured that we will do our bit. I thank the organizers of the 2018 May Day celebration, the leadership of Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, including all other relevant unions, for putting together this program on both state and national levels. I urge all workers, unions, to always play the part of peace and dialogue in making their demands, as employers and employees need one another to succeed. Let us remember that there can be no development without peace, and anything done in the pursuit of peace is good and in the national interest. It is my strong belief that the actions and dispositions we take today on the affairs of our people will ultimately determine our legacy in the face of posterity. I wish you all a marvelous May Day celebrations. Happy Workers' Day. Signed, President of the Senate, Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki,
CON. Long live Nigerian Labour Congress. Long live Trade Union Congress.
Long live.
Long live Nigerian workers.
Long live.
Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Long live.
Thank you very much.
A speech read on behalf of Senate President Olubukola Saraki states that there is no economic growth without the Nigerian worker, buttressing the importance of the Nigerian worker to national development. He urged labor unions to always toe the path of peace through dialogue.
Committee on Labor, representing Dr. Bukola Saraki, President of the Nigerian Senate. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, great Nigerian workers, greatest Nigerian workers, in civil service union here, great Nigerian workers, road transport workers union, great Nigerian workers, up national. It is time to bring the #1 worker in Nigeria, the President of Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba, MNI, soldiering on for the working people of Nigeria, to give us that speech that Nigerian workers want to be given to power. Comrade Ayuba Waba, MNI, may we hear how the Nigerian working people feel as at May Day 2018. There is victory for us, victory. There is victory for us in the struggle for Nigeria. There is victory for us. Africa, the struggle, but victory. Thank you very much. His Excellency, the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, ably represented by the Vice President, His Excellency Professor Yemi Oshibajo, SAN, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, my brother Boss Mustafa, the President of the Senate, ably represented by Senator Victor Ome, the Right Honorable Speaker, members of the National Assembly, Honorable Ministers, Permanent Secretaries, esteemed guests, veterans of our movement, ably led today by the Comrade Governor, the former Governor of Edo State, Comrade Adams Oshimale. I also saw our second President of the Congress, Comrade Alhaji Ali Chiroma, as well as the first General Secretary of the Congress, Alhaji Aliu Dangiwa, members of the Diplomatic Corps, all organs of both NLC and TUC, lest I forget my comrade, colleague, and brother, the President of the Trade Unions Congress, Comrade Bala Baboye Kaigama. Great Nigerian workers. Great. On behalf of the National Executive Council of the Nigerian Labour Congress, I have the honor and privilege to join other speakers to welcome particularly His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to this year's May Day. For us, since 1989, when the first day became a national and global celebration, it has been an epochal occasion in the life of workers all over the world.
Let me therefore use this auspicious occasion to salute the courage and sacrifice as well as contribution of Nigerian workers from all sectors of the economy and pensioners, our senior citizens, to the development of our country. For us at the Nigerian Labour Congress, this year's May Day is very significant because it coincides with our 40th anniversary in the struggle. A day like this, therefore, offers us a perfect opportunity to evaluate our progress as a country and the invaluable contribution of the working class to the development of our country. Your Excellencies, fellow comrades, we addressed you last year on the theme Labor Relation in an Economy that is in Recession and Appraisal. We used the occasion of the 2017 May Day to reflect on the impact of economic recession on labor relation in the country. We noted that the working class often bears the brunt of the ravaging recession then. Since then, the challenges confronting the working class and their families, as well as pensioners, have not significantly changed, despite the cheering news that Nigeria is out of recession and on the path of sustainable development. Workers and labor movement, employers and government are supposed to be partners in progress in national development, based on the understanding that labor creates the wealth of every society. This informs our choice of the theme of this year's May Day as the role of labor movement in national development, there to struggle and there to win. Comrades, Your Excellency, this theme avails us the space to review the contribution of the labor movement in the complex process of our national development. The theme also provides us sober moment to reflect on the state of our economy, the quality of governance, the health of our democracy, the global labor-industrial dynamics, especially from the prism of a nationalism, labor movement, and the need for rededication of ourselves to national rebirth and development. The labor movement has engaged in many struggles and contestation to free workers from exploitation and oppression. We have demanded for a better society, a better working and living condition. We have contributed immensely to our national development. From the pre-independence era to the struggle for independence, we have fought for the enthronement of democratic rule. We have canvassed for good governance at all levels, championed the fight against corruption and the promotion of social justice. The labor movement have provided voice to the voiceless, addressing the huge inequality gap and the provision of shared prosperity among Nigerians have been some of our topmost priorities. We have been at the forefront of strengthening our democratic values, especially through the campaign for electoral reforms that will engender free, fair, and credible elections. Despite the enormous contribution of Nigerian workers and the labor movement to national development, the issue of improved condition of service, standard of living, and welfare has always been true demand and struggle. From the first minimum wage struggle of 125 naira, which was then equivalent to $200 in 1981, to the current minimum wage of 18,000, Nigerian workers always have been forced to bargain so hard, wait for too long, and at the end of the day, make to endure with very little returns that tend to mock their input to national development. This year's May Day seeks to address and inspire strength in every Nigerian workers and pensioners that the only path to victory over the forces of oppression and slavery is to rise above the odds and dare to struggle and dare to win. The challenges threatening our collective survival as workers, as a movement, and as citizens must mobilize in our courage and dare to win and dare to struggle. The state of our economy, distinguished comrades, invited guests, despite the promising nature of our economy, its great potential and positive indicators to recover of our economy, recession especially as evidenced by positive runs of the growth and increases in internally generated revenue, our economy remains largely import-driven and dependent. Though described as mixed, our economy is essentially rent-seeking and suffers from systemic distortion. The overdependence of our economy on crude oil revenue for a very long time continues to expose us to severe shocks from the price fluctuation of international crude in the international market. This was a major issue that landed us in the last recession, because also as a country, we have not made any savings. While we commend the effort of the current government on economic diversification, particularly through agriculture, we are not unmindful of serious structural issues that undermine the progress being made, deeply undermine inclusive growth, and impact negatively on sustainable development. We acknowledge and commend the federal government of Nigeria for the launching of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Together with the existing National Industrial Revolution Plan, the plan can promote survival of industries and creation of mass decent jobs. Rightly set the target of reducing petroleum product import into Nigeria by 80% in 2018. As laudable as these policies are, we must continue to insist that NNPC must revive the refineries in order to meet the set refining targets. We must walk the talk and not repeat the mistakes of our past. Impact of sparing inflation. Dear compatriots, Your Excellency, the 2016 phenomenal increase in the price of petroleum motor spirit, PMS, otherwise known as fuel or petrol, high electricity tariff, and uncertainties in monetary physical policy of government have sustained high inflation rates. Although records from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the Nigerian inflation rate dropped from 15.13% in January to 14.33% in February 2018. This has very little impact on the living condition of Nigerian workers and pensioners. Double-digit inflation rate continue to erode the living standard of Nigerians. The punch of rising living costs in Nigeria is made worse for the average worker by the absence of cushioning measure or palliatives, such as increase in the minimum wage, upward adjustment of salaries, and improvement in social condition. Unfortunately, the living condition of many Nigerian workers and pensioners have been further decimated by arbitrary layoff and retrenchment of workers in some private sector. Even some state governments now find it convenient to activate mass retrenchment of workers as first line of ingenuity to cut down the cost of governance. The challenge of unemployment. The unemployment rate in Nigeria increased to 18.80% in the third quarter of 2007 from 16.20% in the second quarter of 2017. Unemployment has remained high with an alarming proportion of youth joblessness. The few that have to scramble for employment operates under very precarious conditions detonated by job insecurity, poor working conditions, and gender discrimination. The trend of factory closures have continued to spiral out of control, turning our once living centers to economic productivity into worship centers and entertainment centers. Comrades, Your Excellency, as earlier noted, the crisis of widening unemployment in Nigeria has been exacerbated by indiscriminate sack and retrenchment of workers by some public and private employers. Unfortunately, the different levels of government that should be more concerned about protecting our people are the ones leading the campaign, especially states and some private employers. Escalating poverty. More than 70% of our population live below the poverty line. In fact, a number of international economic reports forecast that despite the significant difference in our population size, Nigeria may soon overtake India as the poverty capital of the world if we don't address the issue progressively. The reason for endemic poverty in Nigeria are not far-fetched. Our economic structure does not provide the enabling space for mass industrialization, imbibed with the capacity for sustainable jobs. Our public policy and consumption pattern still encourages the export of our jobs and the import of poverty. Industrialization as a panacea to address the issue of unemployment. Industry is a key driver of sustainable jobs and development for national economies and the foundation of good living standards. United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, had over the years shown that manufacturing industry in sub-Saharan Africa lags behind other developing regions of the world. There are 3 leading economies in Africa, namely Nigeria, which is worth some $406 billion, Egypt, which is worth $332.3 billion, and South Africa, which is worth $294.1 billion. However, in terms of manufacturing value added, South Africa at 25% is the highest, followed by Egypt at 20%, and Nigeria with less than 5%. Ghana is even more industrialized at 6% manufacturing value. This is very significant, and millions of youth join the labor market annually without job making them voluntary slaves in Europe and America. Only industry can provide sustainable job, living wages, and necessary revenue for government to provide the needed infrastructure for development. In order for Nigeria to meet the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, especially SDG 9 dealing with industry and innovation, Nigeria must urgently innovate, revive closed textile, steel and engineering mills. We must industrialize. We must copy China's industrialization drive, which has within 25 years moved over 250 million people out of poverty through manufacturing and industrialization. We must stop exporting raw cotton, crude oil, mineral resources, only to be importing finished textile, petroleum products from China, Europe, and America. Nigeria must make what it consumes, otherwise it will be consumed by the rest of the world. We commend the federal government for refusing to succumb to the Economic Partnership Agreement. We also commend Mr. President in this direction. Also commendable is the caution approach of government to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The NSC is delighted that a broad and inclusive group has been constituted to re-examine the content of the Continental Free Trade Agreement in the overall interest of Nigeria. Comrades, no industrialization without electrification. There can be no industrialization without affordable, available power. The federal government should stop any action plan that will further give money to the non-performing privatized electricity distribution company, DISCOs, in Nigeria. We also call on government to massively invest in mixed energy, especially hydro. And in this connection, we commend the ongoing projects of Mambila and others, solar and nuclear to drive industrialization. In this regard, we wish to call for a reduction of tariff duties on solar panels and other solar products instead of the recent increase in those duties. Stop the smuggling. The government should also combat smuggling of imported contraband, including textile and rice. Customs must always be on duty to fight smuggling of imported banned goods. We commend the current leadership of Nigerian Customs for the increased onslaught against smuggling and urge them to continue to do more to protect our local industries. Raw material, especially cotton. It is ironical that Nigeria today is facing the problem of cotton scarcity. There should be increased production of cotton locally. We have to give incentive to local farmers or cotton growers to encourage them to produce more cotton as raw material, as well as food crops. This will be able to provide more raw material to our textile mills and industries. Executive order. We commend the executive order recently issued by the Federal Executive Council in line with the promise of President Buhari on ease of doing business. Of special importance is the order mandating government agencies to spend more of their budget on locally produced goods. This singular order will help in the recovery of our labor-intensive textile industry and many other factories in Nigeria today that are being closed because of lack of patronage. The challenge is to ensure that ministries, departments, and agencies make the executive order a reality in patronizing locally produced goods. The police and customs department should also stop buying uniforms from Bangladesh and China when the surviving textile factories can produce at home. National development planning. Nigerian workers are worried by constraints imposed by the dearth of deliberate planning of our national economy. For many years, the difference between the prevailing politically tenured role plan as opposed to long-term national development plan, which were tied to the political norms of incumbent government, is therefore for all to see. We can attest that many of the enduring national development legacies were a product of the first, second, and third national development plan. Our budgetary framework remains fail as appropriate bills stay longer than necessary before they are passed into law. This is particular with the case of the federal budget. The 2018 budget is a case in point. It is still trapped at the National Assembly 4 months into the year. This has further compounded the suffering of Nigerians whose daily subsistence depend on budget. We are worried by the unnecessary bickering between the National Assembly and also the executive, viz. The presidency over the budget. We call for an overhaul of our budget system, improved relation between the legislature and the executive, and cutting down of wastages in government, corruption and good governance. The fight against corruption is a collective battle and has to be transparent and holistic. Corrupt persons in and outside government must be dutifully tracked and diligently prosecuted. The need a reform in judiciary to be able to achieve this objective. Recovered loot must be transparently accounted for and utilized to revitalize our economy and attend to the welfare of citizens. As a country, we must address the disparity between the remuneration of political office holders and that of workers in the public sector. It is also important that we tackle the wide gap between actual budget appropriation and releases. We should strengthen process ensuring that government institutions are made to account for public resources committed to their care. We demand for specialized courts to speed up prosecution of all corruption cases. Cases must be dispensed with within a specific period of time. State of our struggle. Comrade, distinguished invited guests, Your Excellency, upward review of the national minimum wage. The process of reviewing upwards the national minimum wage to meet the current realities in the ongoing, especially after inauguration of the tripartite committee by the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces last year. The benefit of a new minimum wage cannot be overemphasized. An increase in the minimum wage will pull many workers out of poverty. A new wage will put the country in positive light globally as the world ensure compliance with the International Labour Organization standard. Overall, an increase in minimum wage will raise the level of productivity and enhance the purchasing power of Nigerian workers. Our current demand of 66,500 as a national minimum wage will only manage to meet the basic needs of average Nigerian worker if inflation is kept at a single digit. We have also proposed that the Minimum Wage Act should be amended to guarantee review every 5 years. This was the recommendation of the 2011 Balgore Tripartite Minimum Wage Committee. We have also proposed that the minimum wage law should apply to all workers and not restricted to only establishments with 50 workers and above. We have also demanded that there should be minimum pension for our retirees and senior citizens who currently, in some cases, are receiving 2,000 naira as monthly pension. The recent nationwide minimum wage public hearing have unmasked the enemies of Nigerian workers. We insist that once the Minimum Wage Act is signed into law, all employers in both public and private sector must pay at once. We shall stand with those willing to pay more than the minimum wage. We shall resist any move to renegotiate the minimum wage at any level. The federal government must ensure that the federal allocation are not released to state and local government that refuse to implement the minimum wage. We are battle ready against public and private organizations that will refuse to conform with the new minimum wage. At our disposal is the power of our votes. We shall ensure that governments that refuse to pay the national minimum wage will not receive the support of the working class, pensioners, and their families. Withholding of contributory pension deduction by employers. Comrades, Your Excellency, incidences of unlawful and illegal withholding of contributory pension deduction from workers' salary and not remitting same as and when due to their pension fund administrator still abound. This unpleasant situation, where workers retire from public service and are forced to wait for several months for their pension benefit to be processed, still persists. This lingering issue and the issue of non-payment must receive adequate attention, especially by state governments. They must continue to militate against the smooth operation of the pension administration in the country. We call on all employers of labor and the 3 tiers of government to promptly remit all contribution of pension deduction to the workers' pension fund administrators. Salaries and pension indebtedness. Your Excellency, currently some states owe workers and pensioners salary and pension ranging from 3 to 15 months. The worst of them being Kogi State and Benue State. Some states owe pensioners many months of pension arrears, despite the bailout funds that His Excellency Mr. President graciously gave to the states, budgetary support funds, and the Paris debt refund. The callous and inhumane treatment of pensioners has unleashed untold suffering on our senior citizens, whose only crime was dedicating their entire lives to the public service. Many of our pensioners have gone down with unavoidable elements and even suffered untimely death while waiting for their well-deserved pension allowance. This situation does not augur well and send wrong signal to workers that are still in active service, because all workers are potential pensioners. The lack of payment of salary and pension in some states is not essentially as a result of insufficient funds. It is mainly symptomatic of crisis of governance. First is the issue of our bloated routine of political jobbers and payment of bogus salaries to such political appointees and political appointment holders by state government. Secondly is the issue of that of public accountability. Thirdly is that some state governments have overborrowed to fund white elephant projects that have no bearing with improving the life of citizens, and in most cases end up as abandoned projects. Those abandoned projects litter all over the country, from one regime to another. Last is the fact that at different levels of government, priority is not accorded to the issue of payment of salary. Because, comrade, we have seen states that receive very low are able to pay salary as and when due. States that receive big amount of money are not able to prioritize the issue of payment of salary. So clearly, essentially, it's not about the issue of resources. Outsourcing and casualization of labor. According to a report published recently by the Campaign for Democratic Workers' Rights, 45% of the workforce in Nigeria operate as casuals. This is akin to modern-day slavery. We will continue to fight against casualization, and let us also put MTN on notice, because we realize that it's only in Nigeria that they treat Nigerian workers as casuals, and therefore let them be on notice that what we did during the Decent Work campaign in October will be repeated nationwide, and therefore they must succumb, they must agree, they must respect our labor laws, to respect the dignity of every Nigerian worker. Failure of the privatization and neoliberal policies of government. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, well-meaning Nigerians, since the privatization of electricity distribution, Nigerians are yet to see the fulfillment of the promises of efficient service delivery. Instead, things have gone worse, with chronic failures by DISCOs to supply prepaid meters, exploitation of Nigerians through estimated billing, and reluctance to attend to the simplest complaint by electricity consumers. The failure of our refineries to work and government over-reliance on massive importation and is actually a challenge. And therefore, if we are to make progress, certainly we can't continue in this direction. And therefore, any attempt to again drive Nigerians to accept this type of policy, because the story is that once we privatize, that the system is going to be perfect. But here we are, many years after privatization, we have not seen actually light at the end of the tunnel. Attack on workers and trade union rights by the Kaduna State government. The foundation of democracy in any society is respect for the rule of law, human rights, and dignity. We condemn in very strong terms the recent violation of workers and trade union rights by the Kaduna State government, where over 40,000 workers from various ministries, departments, and agencies, including tertiary institutions, and the local government were issued sack letters without respect to our labor laws, without respect to pronouncement of court of competence. This is with the intention of avoiding the payment of terminal benefit of those workers. This is an act of cruelty and inhumanity to fellow humans and citizens. Also condemnable is the desperate attempt by the Kaduna State government to deny the SAC workers and trade unions their fundamental right to protest. The right of citizens to peaceful protest is a universally constitutional right that cannot be denied or wished away. The only requirement, according to our legal jurisprudence, is to inform police for coverage. No permission is required. No bureau approval from the security agencies is required. Therefore, the deployment of over 8,000 security forces to stop workers' protests in Kaduna, protecting their legitimate SAC, is an aberration and undemocratic, especially in a situation where pro-government sponsored protest is taking place every day. Even 4 days ago, there was a government-sponsored protest in Kaduna. Workers could recall that in 2012, when Rufai felt threatened by the policies of the then government, he wore a tea cap and joined the organized labor protest from Bega Junction here in Abuja and marched with us and made statement. We wish to remind Governor Rufai that no condition is permanent. A day will come when he will once again need to get crushed as participant in workers' protests. Finally, as an onslaught on labor, Governor Rufai have also violated compliance with Section 16 of the Trade Union Act. He has deducted workers' check-off dues for 7 months and refused to remit to their unions. In fact, to compound the issue, he issued a circular which is contrary to provision of our laws to say that he will no longer deduct. The law is that employers shall, and shall in any jurisprudence is mandatory. So we cannot allow impunity in a democratic setting. And therefore, Nigerian workers and all over the world will be ready to condemn all of this. And therefore, this issue has been reported officially to ILO because it's a fundamental violation of ILO Convention 87, and the law requires that we actually submit a formal report in this regard. The public service. The public service remains the engine room of government for implementation of people-oriented policies and programs. The following issue requires special attention to bring out the best in our civil or public service. 1, the low pay and huge salary disparity in the core civil service when compared to other MDAs needed to be addressed. The ILO principle of equal work for work of equal value should continue to apply. We appreciate the commencement of the payment of promotion arrears, transfer allowance, and other legitimate claim of workers by the federal government, and we pray that this should continue. We also urge federal government to look at the issue of tools and facilities that will make our workers very effective and efficient, and that will add more productivity. The education sector. Comrades, our education sector is very important and is fundamental to human development. And therefore, we must, as a country, try to give priorities to the education sector. We have also looked at the challenges that have actually bedeviled our education sector for a while, which has largely to do with respect for collective bargaining agreement and issue of funding. We must look at alternative way of funding our education sector because we realize also that funding is a bit demanding, and therefore there is that of facilities, there is that of teaching aids, and also the issue of welfare of those workers that provide these key services. And therefore we must look at ingenuity to make sure that we look at extra budgetary provision to support the education sector. The health sector. Our healthcare system is currently undergoing serious challenges, and it used to be one of the best in Africa. We have many people from many neighboring countries troop into Nigeria in search of healthcare services. Today, reverse is the case, as many Nigerians now embark on medical tourism. This leads to huge capital flight from our economy. The principal factor responsible for this decline include funding issue, decay infrastructure and technology, as well as corruption. As I speak, healthcare workers and professionals of all federal tertiary institutions are currently on a nationwide indefinite industrial action. This is largely due to government inability to honor collective bargaining agreement freely entered When I hear the Minister of Health saying that there is no collective agreement, that I think is far from the truth. When he also say that some of the issues has to do with lack of understanding, I think that is far from it. There have been understanding for the past many months, and I'm aware that there is a collective agreement signed. If there are challenges, I think they can be better be resolved on the negotiating table, not creating dichotomy between one cadre and another, or giving preferential treatment to one cadre above and above the other. That is what will not go well with us. National security threat. The nation is immersed in a renewed outbreak of bloodletting and violence. The initial success recorded against Boko Haram insurgents, which earned this government international accolade and respect, have come under serious challenge. The Northeast region have witnessed renewed cases of Boko Haram attack, the abduction of the Dapchi girls as well as the remaining Chibok girls. While we appreciate the effort being put by our armed forces, we also thought that it's important to take on board the issue of addressing all those issues. Condemnation and issuing statement may not help the matter. What is required is actually an action that will bring all of this to an end, and therefore Labour will be ready to ensure that these issues are put to an end. The policy of restructuring. Nigerian workers, pensioners and their allies condemn in its entirety the El-Rufai Committee, which particularly recommended the abolition of local governments. For us, Nigerians, what we needed is local government autonomy, not abolition of local government. Also, the issue of saying that core labor issues, including industrial relation and minimum wage, should be moved to the concurrent list is not in line with global best practice. It's not in line with global convention. The issue of those conventions are issues of member nations. They are not issues of subnational countries. Comrades, the Labour Party. Comrades, the issue of ownership of the Labour Party is no longer in dispute, as the court recently, through a judgment, have said that the Labour Party is actually part and parcel of the Labour movement, and therefore it was formed by us, and that have actually put to rest some of the challenges that the party has. We are working assiduously to reposition the party and make sure also that workers will be able to use that platform to go into politics. Towards the 2019 general election, fellow citizens, Your Excellency, as we progress toward the 2019 general election, we call on the political class and all Nigerians to always put first the interests of Nigeria above any other interest. We must at all times respect our democratic value, imbibe political tolerance, and shun all tendencies of politics of do or die. INEC must work assiduously to ensure free, fair, and transparent election. INEC should provide a level playing ground for all political actors. There are other aspects of the Justice West-led Electoral Committee report that are still very germane and needed to be implemented, especially establishment of the Electoral Offences Commission, where electoral offences can be tried dispassionately. We also advise that INEC should prioritize early preparation, and especially the issue of ensuring that the PVCs are distributed early. International solidarity. Today, as we mark Workers' Day in Nigeria, we solidify with our comrades and trade unionists from Cameroon. Our hearts go out with our comrades in the Cameroon trade union movement who are facing horrifying harassing in the hands of states. It is unfortunate that many of our teachers, civil servants, activists, and even some members of the Cameroonian parliament, especially in the northern, west, and western English-speaking part of Cameroon, have been denied for prolonged their rights, and they are treated inhumanely. And therefore, we request that the Cameroonian authority must respect the right of those workers and the right of their citizens. We call on the government of Cameroon to halt the harassment of our comrades and citizens. The Sahrawi Democratic Republic. The Sahrawi Democratic Republic is the last colony yet to be granted their full independence. And we call on AU and all African countries to continue to support the full freedom and respect for human rights of the people of Sahrawi. We call on Morocco to grant unconditional sovereignty and independence to the people of Sahrawi Republic. We stand with our comrades, the former president of the CUT in Cuba, Comrade Lula da Silva, and Workers' Party of Brazil. Nigerian workers today resolutely with President Lula in his current travel in the hands of capitalists. and their imperialist collaborators. We extend our solidarity with Brazilian workers for their sustained support to Comrade Lula. President Lula's legal harassment heightened the moment it becomes clear that he was the leading candidate for the October 2018 general elections in that country. Political rivals who could not stand Lula's towering popularity have used the courts to get what they cannot get through the ballot paper. This raised the great fear on the fate of popular democracy in Brazil. It is shame that a man who, through his famous Bolsa Familia, that is a program that brought almost 40 million Brazilians out of poverty, could be cruelly handled. He was somebody that left government with a popularity of over 80%, and therefore Nigerian workers today will continue to stand with them. Solidarity with the people of Cuba. It is not to watch also that the Cuban people have managed to stand tall amidst over 47 years of United States economic blockage. Despite isolation by the Western capital, the Cuban healthcare and education system have continued to impress all over the world. The recent smooth transition of political leadership from Comrade Raúl to President Díaz-Canel is commendable. This shows the resilience of the Cuban homegrown democracy. We all have lessons to learn from the discipline and patriotism of the Cuban socialist struggle. While our love and solidarity abide with our Cuban comrades, we call the removal of all form of blockade against the government and people of Cuba. Tribute to Comrade Mandela, Winnie Mandela. We must use this opportunity to salute the late Comrade Winnie Mandela that died and also lived in the struggle. This must be an occasion where we continue to celebrate and inspire our youth to actually rededicate themselves to the service of our country. In conclusion, Your Excellency, comrades, this address cannot be complete without saluting the courage, resilience, and patriotism of Nigerian workers, pensioners, and their families, who have continued to endure the polygraphy and the challenge of our unrepentant elite. Be assured that our first stroke in collective commitment to struggle are enough to dare and also to win. I dedicate this May Day to the Nigerian worker, to the armed forces, to the police, who despite numerous challenges still diligently carry out their responsibility. I dedicate this day to Nigerian pensioners, who despite humiliation by the country they have served still turn up today to swing fervently to the reams of Solidarity song. You truly embodied the finest aspect of our humanity. You continue to inspire our younger comrades that there is virtue and honor in daring and winning. Finally, I salute our forebearers in the struggle, particularly the generations of Labour leader number 1, Pa Michael Imodu, Comrade Alhaji Hassan Somonu, our pioneer president, Comrade Alhaji Ali Chiroma, the second president, Comrade Pascal Baviao, may his soul rest in peace, Comrade Adams Ali Oshumale, who has continued to identify the working class and is here personally, and Comrade Abdul Wahid Umar, who is also here. We consider the honor we recently bestowed on your labor for the labor movement is only a token of what you mean to us. Organized labor in Nigeria will continue to take inspiration from your legacy of daring to struggle and also daring to win. Long live the Nigerian Labour Congress. Long live the working class struggle. Long live the working class solidarity. Long live the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Long live global worker solidarity. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you, and may God continue to bless us.
Was an address by the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba. He said a lot of things concerning state of the economy, impact of spiraling inflation, the challenge of unemployment, escalating poverty in his speech, industrialization. He said so many things concerning national development, especially the current demand of 66,500 naira as the national minimum wage. He also talked about the minimum pension for retired workers and senior citizens, who he said are in some cases receiving 2,000 naira as monthly pension.
It's unique in many respects. Today's rally is unique. It's one that hasn't been like this for some time. At today's rally comes a gentleman with a quiet mien. He comes in solidarity with the working class of Nigeria, and today he comes as a comrade. That gentleman in a short while will be addressing us at this 2018 May Day celebration. Comrades, his name is Yemi Osinbajo, a professor of law, a senior advocate of Nigeria, and Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Today, he comes standing in for Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Comrades, let's give a befitting welcome to Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Great Nigerian workers! Great Nigerian workers! Great of the greatest Nigerian workers! Distinguished Senate President, ably represented by the Vice Chairman, Senate Committee on Labor, Senator Victor Ume, other members of the National Assembly present, especially Comrade Senator Shehu Sani, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, the Honorable Minister of Labor and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, Permanent Secretaries, Heads of Federal Agencies, the President of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba, MNI, the President of the Trade Union Congress, Comrade Boboy Kaigama, all labor leaders here present, the country representative of the International Labour Organization, Mr. Dennis Zulu, and other members of the diplomatic community, especially His Excellency, the Ambassador of Cuba, all comrades present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by wishing us all gathered here today, mainly of our two federations of trade unions, the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, a happy celebration of the May Day in solidarity with organized labor the world over. I salute and pay tribute to you all, Nigerian workers and working families. It is your hard work, innovation, resilience and patriotism that has helped to build this nation to the place of greatness that it currently occupies. I must also seize this opportunity to acknowledge the historical contributions of the Nigerian working people and organized labor to the political, economic, social, and cultural development of our nation. The Nigerian organized labor has always been in the forefront of the push for a better Nigeria, from the struggles for independence right through to the clamor for the restoration of democracy, and in the last 19 years, for the sustenance of the freedoms guaranteed by our democracy. I must also say that the Nigerian organized labor has contributed largely and actively towards helping Nigeria get out in record time from an economic recession, which bedeviled us, especially through 2016. This administration has remained committed to improving the welfare of the Nigerian people. When we came into office, at least 22 states were owing salaries, some for a whole year. If you recall, in November 2015, the president said, and I quote, "All my life, I've always earned a salary. So I understand what it means when your salary is not paid or when it is not enough." Just last year, the president, speaking to governors visiting him again, went back to the issue of salaries. And he said, "I don't know how any of you can go to sleep at night knowing that your workers have not been paid." The president's concern for workers is not theoretical or rhetorical, but one that is born out of experience and respect for the sweat of the working classes. This is why we evolved mechanisms to bail out all the 36 states of the Federation to the tune of 1.91 trillion so far, including Paris Club repayments, in recognition of the shortfalls in their finances arising in particular from the oil shocks of 2015 and 2016. We have extended this support regardless of party affiliation to enable the states settle the backlog of arrears and salaries and pensions of workers. At the inauguration of the National Economic Council in 2015, President Buhari publicly declared that our administration will support every state because poverty is no respecter of ethnic group, party affiliation, or religion. While we do recognize that the payment of salaries and pensions is essential, we are also conscious of the fact that the increasing cost of living and the recognition to ensure a fair and decent living wage has rendered the minimum wage instrument which is currently in force obsolete. Accordingly, President Buhari on November 27, 2017, inaugurated a tripartite National Minimum Wage Committee to negotiate the national minimum wage for our workers. As you are all aware, the subject of a national minimum wage for the Federation is within the exclusive legislative list of the 1999 Constitution, which means that it is the responsibility primarily of the federal government. Although there are arguments regarding fixing minimum wage in a federation such as ours, it is the responsibility of government to establish the necessary social protection for all Nigerian workers based on the ability of each tier of government to pay. The argument for a national minimum wage, therefore, cannot be faulted because the minimum wage is the minimum amount of compensation that an employee must receive for putting in his or her labor, and as such, it should be anchored on the principles of social justice, equity, and fairness. We believe that those who can pay above the social protection floor are free to do so, as many have been doing in many states and sectors of the economy. This administration has no intention of presiding over the dismantling of the gains of organized labor through the years, especially almost four decades ago. It is our hope, therefore, that the tripartite committee comprising government, labor, and the private sector will expedite its assignment to enable the federal government present an executive bill on a new national minimum wage to the National Assembly for passage into law as soon as possible. In the meantime, the federal government and the state governments will continue to work together to improve the conditions of workers across the country. Great Nigerian workers, it will be belaboring the point to say that a viral organized labor is a vital institution for our nation at every point in its development. In our political and democratic evolution, a viral labor is a sine qua non. In the interest of the men and women of our society who need a voice to speak loudly against economic or social injustice, labor must remain united. Let me seize this opportunity once again to reiterate this administration's commitment to the unity of the Nigerian organized labor, to serve as a bulwark against divisive forces internally and externally. Accordingly, it is my advice that the Nigerian labor movement must employ its leadership skills of conflict resolution and utilize all the internal mechanisms to resolve conflicts. Factionalization is not an option. It is not the answer. I must at this point appreciate the Nigerian labor movement
for being a strong pillar of support for our anti-corruption agenda. The government recognizes the fact that indeed the first-line real victims of corruption are Nigerian workers and working families, along with the rural poor. They are the ones who suffer the most from the corruption of the political classes. It is regrettable that despite the enormous revenues that Nigeria has earned from oil in the recent past, we still have problems with payment of salaries and pensions of workers, largely due to mismanagement and corruption. I assure you that under our administration, we will ensure that we expend every kobo of public funds towards securing the welfare of Nigerians. We have continued to demonstrate our commitment to the welfare of Nigerians by ensuring that we protect the socially excluded and the socially vulnerable. For the first time in the history of our country, we are implementing a full social protection program through a youth employment scheme, NPower, microcredit to small businesses, conditional cash transfers to the poorest, and a homegrown school feeding program. So far, we have employed 200,000 graduates in our NPower program, and we are bracing up to do 300,000 more. Today, we are feeding over 7 million children in 22 states, and we employ 70,000 cooks. So far, we have given 362,000 microcredit loans, and our target is to give 1 million microcredit loans, especially to market women and artisans. We've also given over 300,000 of the poorest Nigerians our conditional cash transfers. Our target is to give this benefit to 1 million of the poorest. The issue, of course, is that every country of the size of Nigeria, especially a developing country, must have a social protection policy. We must have a safety net. The resources of the country must be used to protect those who either cannot work or are vulnerable or poor in ways that only those who experience it can imagine. It is our duty, and we take it as a duty, as a progressive government, to ensure that we protect the poor and the vulnerable. And this is the main objective of the programs that we have put in place. These programs have been targeted at the most vulnerable segments of our society. They are meant to ensure that we build a socially cohesive society in which the resources of the country work for all. And we'll continue to apply public funds in such a way that no section of the country or segment of the population suffers social exclusion. This is the reason why we have prioritized agriculture in our economic planning. Our investment in the sector is paying off. Importation of rice has dropped to just 2%. Millions of farmers producing rice, sorghum, millet, tomatoes, and other types of grain also are every day earning a decent returns on their investments. We will soon be self-sufficient in both rice and tomato paste. We will soon be self-sufficient in our food. As the President said, we must grow what we eat. It is up to us to ensure that we are self-sufficient in food production. And it's the duty of our government, and we have considered it our historical task to ensure that we are able to provide food that is homegrown and that is available to all Nigerians for cheap. We have no choice but to improve the business environment. Our business environment must make it possible for small and medium-scale businesses to work. And to this end, we are committed to ensuring the reduction of interest rates so that businesses can have access to cheap credit. It is important for us to encourage young people in technology and innovation and in the entertainment industry. And we intend shortly, through the instrumentality of an advisory body, to mainstream the incentives available to the rest of industry to these new businesses. Let me say also that as you're all quite aware, that insecurity has remained a big challenge for us all. But we are determined to face this challenge and to secure this country more than ever before. To this end, the President and the Security Council have been engaging in rigorous stock-taking with a view to re-engineering our security architecture to meet the challenges of the mindless killings in some parts of the country, including the threats of marauding herdsmen, cattle rustlers, and bandits. It's our duty to secure the rights of farmers and all citizens, and to ensure that herders also can rear their cattle, especially as we have proposed in well-resourced ranches. But there are also criminals who want to stoke religious and ethnic crisis, who want to divide the country using all manner of excuses, including the recent attacks. How can anyone explain, or what is the explanation for anyone going into a church to kill priests and worshippers? We recognize that while the protection of lives and property is a primary responsibility of government, it is also incumbent on us as citizens to share in this responsibility. It is, at the end of the day, a collective responsibility. This country belongs to us all. Our country is great because of the talents of our people from every tribe, tongue, and religion. Our diversities are our strength. We must reject every attempt to divide us. Our focus must be on developing our economy, providing opportunities in industry, in manufacturing, in technology for our young people. To borrow from D.K. Chukwumerije, a young Nigerian poet, we must build bridges, not walls. We must continue to have faith in our country. We must continue to express that faith in the way that we work for our country. I thank you for your continued patience, all workers of this nation, and for the great sacrifices that you continue to make to move our nation forward. Nigerian workers are, by any estimation, the most patriotic segment of the population. You are amongst the most committed taxpayers. Your taxes are deducted at source, so there's no question that you pay your taxes. Hence, nobody can deny you the right to interrogate government and how public funds are expended at all times. You remain amongst the few organizations that have risen above primordial sentiments and have gone across tribe, ethnicity, and religion to come together to unite in a common purpose. We believe that the worst is over for Nigeria. Accordingly, we will do everything within our powers to sustain the current economic recovery efforts. We'll continue to reinforce our macroeconomic policies to achieve sustainable economic stability and growth. We'll also continue to ensure that growth comes along with jobs and that there is a just distribution of the national wealth. This administration has come this far, always counting on the continued support and goodwill of organized labor. I'm confident that together we will achieve our objective of building a united, strong, and prosperous nation. Thank you all for your attention, and may the Almighty God bless us all and our great country. But before I sit down, all over the world today, we are celebrating labor, and we are celebrating the nation state that provides the opportunity for all labor. And everywhere you go, anywhere in the world today, you will hear people hailing labor in their own traditional ways. So we are also